Well, if you're on the job hunt this year, the odds of getting hired are in your favor. But which cities will up your chances of landing employment? Which cities should you avoid? Here to break them down for us, the author of How Money Walks, our old friend Travis Brown. Travis, good morning.
It's a pleasure to be back. Happy holidays.
Well, thanks so much. So the question here is, where are you most likely to get a job? That is the measure we're looking at this morning, correct?
That's right. This week, in fact, Time Magazine published a Manpower Group study here that we have summarized that asked employers where will they be expecting to hire the most, city by city.
So the idea here is that sometimes if you want to work, you have to move. And that's, bad news but for some people, but that's a reality. So where are you most likely to get a job?
Well, we know it does matter. The price of work matters. A lot of conditions around jobs matter around the country. What we're seeing from the big picture of employers is that about 19% are expecting next year, this is estimating quarter one of 2015, to increase staff levels, while about 6% are saying decrease. So what that translates to around the country is a very different look at the job picture according to what employers are saying.
Okay.
And so what we see in top areas, border areas, or both California, Texas, and Florida are showing strong indications of gains, and weaker areas across like Washington State and New York State. We can zoom in on any of these regions and talk more in detail.
Okay, so let's get specific. You say the strongest cities for employment looking forward. The first is Cape Coral, Florida, a city that was devastated by the subprime meltdown. It's right outside Fort Myers on the west coast of Florida. There it is. Yeah,
but zooming in Cape Coral, you have strong growth by employers, looking at net employment outlook of 32%, way ahead of the national average across other cities. Looking at hospitality, tourism, driving a lot of that strength. Of course, Florida doing very well, even in this economy, cutting taxes, getting their job performance, and really trying to compete more with Texas.
Okay, great. And speaking of Texas, you say McAllen, Texas, down in the southern part of the state, which is
way down here,
the Mexican border. There you go.
Right down there, right on the border.
McAllen, Texas, is a city that has not been a prosperous city over the years, but you say it is roaring back, and it's one of the best places to look for a job right now.
Yeah, employers are saying 29% employment outlook there. Of course, right at the border there with U.S. trade between Texas and Mexico. Strong performance expected there.
Now, Grand Rapids, Michigan, this is interesting because Michigan has been kind of a case study for, the demise of industrialism. Eastern Michigan, obviously in trouble, Detroit. But you say the western part of the state, the West Coast, as they say, is really doing well.
Grand Rapids, Michigan showing some strength with manufacturers, aviation, and an employment outlook of 26%, well above the national average here.
And Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah, right next door, Milwaukee, doing very well, seeing performance back in particularly small to medium-sized manufacturing. Governor Scott Walker, of course, cutting taxes, seeing job growth strengthening out of Chicago towards Milwaukee.
Interesting. And here's one I didn't expect. Oxnard, California, east of Los Angeles. That state's had a lot of economic trouble. We've chronicled that pretty extensively here on Fox and Friends. But you say Oxnard, doing great.
Well, as a state, California has a lot of things in the way of job performance, right? A high price on work, 13.3% maximum income, right? And basically, we've got an international trade hub in Los Angeles doing very well with trade in Asia.
Interesting. All right. So where should you not move? Let's look. Let's on the list. First up, you say is Spokane, Washington.
Well, Spokane, Washington is up here. We have
Eastern Washington.
Weaker performance. Employers only looking at a 2% growth, and that's well below the national average. Other areas in the region include Portland, Oregon, where they're only seeing a 3% average.
Despite its famous restaurants, not a good place to get a job.
Well, it's certainly not projected by what employers say will be a strong performance
Interesting.
next year.
Then you say, this is not so much a surprise, Syracuse, New York, and Rochester.
Right. We're seeing both of the regions here in western New York. Of course, New York, very high tax rate and climate an issue here, and this has been an area weak in performance relative to the rest of the country for quite some time, and that's projected to stay that way.
And finally, this was a surprise to me, Indianapolis, Indiana, you say.
Yeah,
not
again,
growing in the way you'd expect.
Well, at least what employers are saying, 6% net employment outlook, well below the national average there. But we know Indiana's doing, as a state, a little bit better than the rest of the country.
Yeah, it is doing pretty well. Travis, thanks a lot for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.